Today we are talking about church and politics. Because of the unfortunate limitation of time, I'm just going to read through my speech. I'm not going to talk a lot. I am even going to hardly maintain eye contact. But because you are intellects, I expect you to have absolutely no problem with that. And if time allows, then we can emphasize on some issues, all right? So church and politics. I don't know what you are expecting. I wish I was a successful politician, Christian politician, because I would have something to show for what I'm going to say. I have no authority, just a student like you, but I thank God because we are sharing together, all right? Let's get started. And then after this, I'll share my speech so that in case you want to see it, you can see it, all right? All right? Yeah. By the way, you look good. And thank you, Josh. If I ever become the president, I'll appoint you as chief of staff. My two good friends here, you'll be in charge of interior and coordination, right? Yeah. All right, back to business. So I want us to define politics and church first so that we can move swiftly. So church is an assembly of God's people, and we are an assembly of God's people. So we are a church, right? And church, as we all know, assumes three major dimensions. And the first one is an individual, me and you. We are the church. And the second dimension is the ideology. We have one main idea that we sell to the world. That is the gospel, right? That's the gospel. That's our main idea. Ideas of other states, of other departments and other institutions may be different, like schools offer education, but we offer the gospel, right? And the church as an institution, we have the church as an institution, which means that it is a corporate citizen that operates under certain legal parameters stipulated in the Constitution of Kenya. So it has rights and responsibilities, just like any other legal institution in Kenya. So that is basically church. You don't need to know a lot about church because we are a church. But politics is another different thing, because we have a lot of controversies about politics, and there is actually no absolute definition for politics, but the definition in, I don't know which dictionary, but at least I found it on Google, is that actually the dictionary meaning is the activities associated with the governance of a country or area, especially the debate between parties having power. The simplest, most basic definition of politics is that politics is the way people living in groups make decisions. Politics is about making agreements between people so that they can live together in groups, such as tribes, cities, or countries. This means that at the most basic level, we are all political. Are we not political? For example, you decided to come to church. It's a decision you made. You had other alternatives, so that is actually a political decision. But I'll show us how later. So we decide which activities to engage in, which course to study, which friends you want to associate with, and all that. When we look at politics from a biblical perspective, we notice that God from the beginning demonstrates fundamental political attributes by giving Adam and Eve, the responsibility to name animals and dominate the rest of the universe. The God-given mandate to tile the land is a perfect explanation of politics. Indeed, politics is about tiling the land. And across the entire first quarter of the Bible, God is singly the governor of humanity who elects prophets to manifest his governance and be his mouthpiece to the children of Israel. So like any state, the Israelites are subject to a law given by God under the custodianship of judges. And I believe you can read through the Bible and you'll find out that. Then the Israelites later demand for an earthly king during the tenure of Prophet Samuel. And the political system seemingly changes over time when the people of God now have an earthly king. For every king, a prophet is appointed by God as a mouthpiece, and he is part of the king's advisory board and a fundamental figure in the governance. During the reign of King Herod, however, we notice a change in the political system. The king is subject to other senior Roman dignitaries like Julius Caesar and all the others. And In recent centuries, we have seen various states, or unless we've not seen, we've read in history that they have adopted various political systems, like some operated under the monarchical system, kingship systems, which are dictatorial. Other forms like the communistic governance, actually like China. China is a communist state. You know that? Even Cuba. And the entire Soviet Union before it died. Has it died? You guys who are conversant with history, I believe it died. But Kenya in particular is a democratic state, and that is why we can wear how we want, we can eat what we want, we can do everything we want, we can vote the leaders we want, because we are democratic. So I want us to move into the role of the church in the whole of these affairs of politics. So the basic role of the church, actually, the basic is evangelism, as given by Christ in the Great Commission. The principal responsibility of the church is to make Christ known in the entire universe. The church, being an assembly of believers, also engage in other activities within the fellowships in pursuit of Christ-likeness. So, after knowing what church is and what politics is, we should actually ask ourselves, so should the church engage in politics? And that is a big question. Many people have been having that question. So, given the phase of politics and the certainly unfortunate redefinition and contamination of the current politics, this question is unbelievably popular. Most people have such a naive perspective about this topic. I engaged in a very infuriating conversation with a certain friend of mine that I had actually met recently. And I asked him, so should the church engage in politics? The friend told me that absolutely not. And he's a young Christian fellow youth, a very radical one actually. And to hear him say that the church should absolutely not participate in politics was quite unfortunate. And so he actually said that these affairs should be left to the secular world to run. This is a secular world. You are in a secular world, you're not in heaven. But in such a secular world, when you talk of secular people, you are talking about people who are not Christians, people who are not of God, so they should be led to run these things. And that was quite unfortunate. And unfortunately, this is an embodiment of the unfortunate scenario in Kenya. And most people sadly have this theory rooted deep in their minds, which affects a lot the response to political orientation. Politics are illustrated in its definition is not an evil. God himself is the designer of politics, as alluded in the creation. He is the king of all kings and the sovereign ruler of all. Humanity have, however, corrupted politics over time to such a dirty affair. Referring to church in all its three dimensions, we most certainly should engage in politics. We are the hope for the realignment of our politics to set a standard to be emulated. Indeed, politics are too dirty to be left politicians alone. I was privileged to be a delegate at the Church and Politics Summit this year. And whoever said that statement is Dr. Ezekiel Mutua. By then he was the CEO of KFCB. Those who are laughing are people who are aware of the current affairs. For those who don't know, go know what happened to KFCB and Ezekiel Mutua. So separating ourselves from politics makes us ignorant Christians. We cannot ignore politics, for it involves formation of policies that affect our daily lives. Politics determine the schools we go, the hospitals we visit, how we go to church, and when, like recently in COVID-19 period, we could not go to church. And the government said we can't because there's COVID. That's a political decision. Politics are too important to be left to politicians alone. And that statement was made by who? It was made by the chair of NCIC, Dr. Reverend Samuel Kobia, during that same summit. And as a church, we have to seek the welfare of this state, and that means we have to be engaged in politics. Because as Jeremiah 29 verse 7 says that, but seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find welfare. Unfortunately, we've been brought up in a theology that teaches us to come out of it, my children, come out. The world and its systems are passing. We have been taught that spirituality actually is all that matters. But one fundamental fact that we must appreciate is that the journey to heaven passes through earth. and that we must remain faithful until our work on earth is done and our term expires. Therefore, this means that we possess a dual citizenship. We are citizens of heaven through the salvation of Jesus Christ. But this does not, however, excuse us from the Kenyan citizenship. We eat in Kenya, we buy our clothes in Kenya, we study in Kenya, you go to class in Kenya, even church, you go to church in Kenya. Therefore, assuming that earthly matters don't matter is a joke. So, we must therefore seek to engage on other citizens without compromising our heavenly citizenship, but rather in a manner that makes everyone else inordinately desire it. We are the salt of the earth. Therefore, the absence of saltiness on the world is ultimately our fault. We cannot just be salt and remain the salt shaker. David Bryant, in one of his books, argues that every Christian goes through a two-phase conversion. The first conversion is from the world into Christ, and the second conversion is with Christ into the world. And this means that we are first transformed by the renewal of our minds, then we are sent back into the world where its systems test the content of our character. We do not go to heaven immediately we are born again, but we remain here to give the saltiness. This provides all the more reason why we must engage and be ready to speak into earthly politics. So the role of the church, I'm talking about the role of the church in general, and the first is that the church is a moral conscience of the state. The church, in its individual and institutional dimensions, is responsible for holding the state accountable with a view of sustaining our moral fabric. It ought to be a voice of reason to the state. The church assumes the responsibility of a prophet to speak into ethics of the state. A prophet is alone, and thus those who choose to take this route must be ready to be ridiculed. It takes wisdom and courage to correct the government when it's gone wrong. I found these two prophets that somebody gave an example of the prophet Nathan. But I did not miss, it was a slip of the tongue. Prophet Nathan corrects David, and you know the story of David. So he corrects David, and what he does is actually, he gives him a very infuriating story about a certain incident, and it leaves David pronouncing judgment upon himself. But he's not aware of that, of course. But there is another prophet called John, centuries later, or many years later, and he condemns Herod directly, and Salome asks for his head. And so John the Baptist's head is chopped off. What does this mean? It means that as we engage in the role of being the moral conscience and engaging in correcting the leaders, a prophet should be careful to fearlessly address the government in a wise but clear approach. Therefore, I know right now we have little we can do about this, but I know in the future we will be the people in the clergy, in all those places, and we will do this. Remember that, right? So the next role is advocacy. Advocacy is defined as any action that speaks in favor of, recommends, argues for a cause, supports or defends, or pleads on behalf of others. The church cannot keep quiet when the government is exploiting the masses, nor when the masses are misbehaving. Christian professionals who have the privilege to access government platforms have the responsibility to speak on behalf of those who do not have a voice nor a platform. They must advocate for equal rights and equitable distribution of resources, as well as speak against social injustices, among other things that we know. God loves justice, like seen in Isaiah 61 verse 8, Psalms 33, 5, and requires us to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God. Micah chapter 6 verse 8 and Amos 5, 22 to 24. Our individual actions and societal structures should enable all people to share in what God has provided. The story of Esther, who pleaded on behalf of the Jews to the king, is a perfect illustration. That is in Esther chapter 4, 13 to 6. Not 13, what did I say? Esther chapter 4, you read from 13 onwards to 6 and verses 13. Mordecai talks to Esther, tells her, let me just read them. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think of yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise from the Jews, for Jews from another place. But you and your father's house will perish. If today was my birthday and I had one wish to make, I would wish that the secretary gives me some water. But now, because it's not my birthday, I not make that wish. Let's continue. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go gather all Jews and be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast for him, as you do. Then I will go to the king. Though it is against the law, I will. And if I perish, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. So, advocacy leads us to care for others even when we have nothing to gain out of it. Like Nehemiah and Esther, Esther was associated to the king, and Nehemiah was a cupbearer to the king himself. He seemingly had a prestigious life, a good life that should not concern himself with other affairs outside. But he concerned himself with the Jews in Judah and all the others, and you can see the success when he rebuilt the wall of Jerusalem. Are we aware of that story? Yeah. So, the other role is mediation. Mediation is a structured, interactive process where an impartial third party assists disputing party in resolving conflict through the use of specialized communication negotiation skills and techniques. The church is a mediator for political differences. Kenya is prone to political differences that often have catastrophic effects, as experienced in the 2008 post-election violence. The church has the responsibility to mediate in such unfortunate circumstances. The church should also be proactive in mediation role. Most of the time we wait for things to happen and then we are reactive, but we should be proactive. Mediation, intervention should have the interests of all people. Archbishop Anthony Moheria, in case that is your bishop, he said something during the summit. He said that we do not need permission from politicians to engage in mediation. He further argues that mediation seeks more than agreement. It seeks the realignment of intentions for higher transcendence values. Church as a coach. The church has a responsibility to nurture future leaders. It carries on its shoulders the responsibility to hold those leaders accountable and being a voice to reckon with. Dr. Oliver Kisaka, again, maybe he's your bishop somewhere, and during the Church and Politics Summit, said that because politics in Kenya is such a rigorous, antagonizing, cutthroat competition, those who go into it are likely to be bruised. The church must be willing to support them, not criticize them and discourage them. Are we together? Supporting the government is also another role. We have not been called to condemn the government, nor identify what it has not done. We have been called to commend its good work as well and support its activities and projects for the well-being of our nation. For example, we can commend the government right now. We can all see the SGR. Have you ever traveled on SGR? Have you? I am saying that thing is amazing. Even though I have never traveled, I know very well that people actually enjoy traveling on the SGR. Have you seen the expressway? Have you seen the expressway being built in Westlands? You'll be surprised. The separation of the church from the state. The involvement of the church. Kikohozi imetumwa ama. I think I should embark on my wish. Some water. The separation of the church from the state. The involvement of the church in politics does not ultimately mean the engagement of church in the state. In being involved in politics, the church does not try to absorb the state. The church is part of the state, which operates under certain legal parameters, as I said. We are therefore not seeking clericalization of the state or governance by clergy. There exist various models of church and state cohesion which include complete unity. This represents a system where the church and the government function together, as historically in the Ethiopian context and the Orthodox Church. There is also established religion. The church in this context the state in this context has adopted an official religious stand and has granted, Fortunata. How you can think for you, so that you can be the women rep in Nairobi. I'm struggling to open this, but if you come, you might be the head of what? Yeah, as I continue. Thank you, God bless you. So you'll be in charge of Kenha because you're an engineer. So, yeah, thank you so much. You can actually put it here, just wow. So established religion, the state in this context has adopted our official religious stand and has granted its followers special privileges, as in the case of England and the Anglican Church or the Catholic Church in many Latin American nations. There is also significant symbolism. The government recognizes God in its foundational constitution or with other commitments, as in Germany or Zambia or Bahamas, and declares itself a Christian nation. Neutral cooperation. The state recognizes the significance of faith and seeks to work in cooperation with religious institutions, like in the case of most African countries where their cultural significance overlap. Kenya oscillates between cultural significant symbolism and neutral cooperation. Complete separation, state and church are separate by power, like in the case of Russia or France. But there is also an illegitimate institution where the church is illegal and persecuted, like in the case of China and some Muslim nations. We have not been called, however, regardless of how the church and the state is cohesive, we have not been called to serve Christians alone, but all humanity, for the love of Christ teaches us to love all humanity despite our differences. So how can a Christian be involved in politics? Actually, now I'm coming to what we can actually do right now, not in future, right now. So the first thing is being responsible citizens. Institutional credibility follows personal credibility. This means that the corruption in our system, in the government system, is evidence of the corruption of individual values. Is that true? The pursuit of a better nation begins with every individual in response to our patriotism. We should seek excellence at every level, and whatever good you do that leads to the improvement of this beautiful God-given world is an act of obedience to God in reference to procreation or tilling the land. Sorry, doesn't matter anyway. So we should be ready to offer ourselves fully to work as unto the Lord in every responsibility that has been entrusted on us. As I was watching my status today, I saw a post by someone saying that Mother Teresa once said, I don't know how true that is, but at least I am not the one who said it, so I'm quoting them, that if everyone swept their door, the world would be clean, the whole world would be clean, and I believe that is true. One of my favorite presidents in the United States is J.F. Kennedy. You know that man? He was a president in the 1960s, and he said during his inauguration that he told Americans, don't ask what the government can do for you, but rather ask what you can do for your country. And I found this very interesting. I mean, instead of crying out, you government do this, do something for your nation in response to patriotism, and I would add on that, do it as unto the Lord, right? Because that's what we ought to do. And we have a responsibility to pray for our political leaders of the nation. We have a responsibility to pray for the well-being of a nation and its leaders. Leadership is always a grueling and back-breaking responsibility. Any leader therefore needs strength from the Lord. Appreciating the power of prayer, even in the affairs of governance, is a fundamental principle that every Christian should embrace. Commending the government is also our responsibility. Christian citizens should commend the good work by the government or other non-governmental operatives. This does not, however, somehow excuse us from questioning the government and other institutions. PLO Lumumba, during that same summit, said that the very fundamental thing you must do at whatever station you are in is to question things. So you have to question things every time. Some of the responsibilities, other responsibilities, joining a political party, funding political parties, and funding those who vie for elective positions. There is also a very major role called voting. Time is spent like what now? Let every soul be subject. You can project Romans chapter 13. And because of unfortunate limitation of time, I will not read that. So I'll just go. You read it as I read my speech. So, as evident, Paul tells us to honor and respect political leadership, for it is instituted by God. This, in other terms, means that Christians should understand that political or earthly leadership exists because God allows it to exist. We therefore have the responsibility to honor those who occupy such positions and appreciate that they are all answerable to God, whether Christians or non-Christians. Respect and honor in this case is not dependent on their actions, which means that we must disagree with those who go wrong in an honorable manner. This verse has, however, been used by many Christians to water their ignorance. In the time of Paul, their country was under the Roman rule. The Roman Empire was governed by an emperor to whom they were supposed to pay tribute. They had absolutely no involvement in the decision of who will become their emperor. They were mere subjects. Therefore, in the absence of choice, all that they could do was to pray that the Lord causes the right officials to take office. Right leaders in this context does not necessarily mean merciful or godly leaders, for we know that God does both good and bad for his own glory. In our modern society, however, the people have not only been given the privilege to pray, but also to vote for their leaders. That means we have been given an opportunity to participate in voting in our leaders. When Samuel was exiting office, the Israelites wanted him to anoint a king for them to rule like the other nations. God was not for this, but he allowed it in response to their choice. He, however, gave them the implications of choosing another king over God as their king. In our current system, where we have a choice of leaders, God may allow or may not allow those whom we choose to rule us. Just like in the time of Samuel, the decision we make has its implication. We have a fundamental role to play in ensuring that we choose the right leaders, for we are likely to face the consequences of our choice. In a perfect democracy, the leaders are a perfect reflection of the people. We should, however, avoid a perfectionistic approach towards voting. Everyone has faults, and when I talk of faults, I mean minor faults. I mean, you don't tell us you grabbed 50 billion and then you have faults. So we should not judge you. We should just elect you. We should focus on the major things. We should, however, focus on what they can offer to the state. Every voter should have a portfolio of factors to consider when voting and avoid being a single issue voter. Our Kenyan politics are highly organized around ethnic placements. Tribalism is a major barrier to political efficacy. We should develop a culture of viewing people for their values and not prejudge them according to their tribes. So no one chooses which tribe they want to be born in, right? I mean, it's weird. Tribalism is real. For example, I believe that when I study, when people don't know where, the name Kabucho is quite rare, so they were struggling to understand, where does that man come? What tribe is that guy? It's that serious. Even in church, people struggle. You think I'm joking? That must have been some of the first thoughts you thought. Is that not true? God knows. So, we should have, where was I? When you choose to vote, what? Okay, when you choose to vote for a candidate who has a history of corruption and incompetence, it would be unfit to complain when they do exactly that once they get into office. Unfortunately, when this happens, people run to Romans 13 to excuse themselves. Quite unfortunate. I mean, sorry if he's your governor, but I hope they are not members of the state here. But you choose Alaleku, and he was demoted because there was insecurity in Kenya, and you make him governor. Waiguru is suspected to have gone with some cash, and you elect him governor. That is how serious and joking we are. And then we talk of Romans what? 30. So we need to be careful. Vie for political positions. I'm almost done. Can I see how? All right. Let me see what. It's enough time. Vie for political positions. Proverbs 29 verse 2 says, "When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn." Our political system in Kenya is in such a state that external bodies can hardly influence or affect any change, for the systemic corruption has deeply taken root. The Kenyan political nightmare will never be changed by our external sermons, as good as they are. Some of us Christians must be bold enough to go into governance and state affairs. Therefore, there are some fundamental issues that any Christian aspiring to be a politician should consider as they traverse the turbulent waters of politics. And as youths, I am calling upon us to consider this role of vying for political positions. Often we are fearful. Fear. We don't want to engage. But I'll come to that. First thing is inspiration. What inspires you to join politics? You must have goals, for corruption is often fueled where there are no goals. Some politicians are willing to spend millions on their campaign because they know once they get into governance, they will cover all their money and even have some excesses. In the time of Aristotle, I borrowed this from Kisaka Oliver. He said that in the time of Aristotle, members of parliament were wealthy members of the society who represented them by not only voice but also financially in a system called oligarchy. They funded development projects from their own personal wealth. In the modern politics, most politicians are motivated to go into government out of their selfish interest and the desire to acquire wealth fast. Any Christian aspiring to be a politician should realign their aspiration to the desire to serve the people and not to exploit them. His Excellency, the President of Malawi, Lazarus Chakwera, during the same summit, said that we have an alternative approach to view politics as a vocation, a calling from God. And the preparedness to receive this calling is the preparedness of being authentic and courageous Christians, in which the vocation comes in response to Christianity, patriotism, and professionalism. There is also an aspect that Christians should consider called values. Some of the Christian politicians who are already in government were people of integrity before they joined politics. As soon as they joined politics, their values died because they either got compromised or on the way, or they never really meant their stand. Christian politicians should make their stand of incomplacency from the beginning and be consistent and disciplined to the cause regardless of the consequences. For what is started by integrity must be sustained by integrity. And definitely, certainly, whatever is started by corruption then must be sustained by corruption. See, that's true. If you stole money, you'll have to, and hid it, you'll have to hide it again the next time and the other time, and you'll steal some more because you have to keep on stealing. So unfortunate. Wow. They should rely on God alone to help them sustain their values. For when left on us to decide, the deceitful heart of man will always desire or choose the wrong they do not desire. I know you think yourself as a person of great integrity, Mr. Dennis Kuria. Oh, Dennis Kuria. Oh, you think of yourself as a man of great integrity, Kiptoo, but I want to tell you, maybe it's just because you've not been presented with an opportunity. That, I mean, maybe you had struggle as a comrade, you have not had supper for 1 week, and then there is an opportunity, you just need to do something illegal and you have 5K. Would you take it as a man of integrity? Sometimes it's because you've not been exposed to some opportunities. But we really have to rely on God for our values, because when left on us, we will definitely choose the wrong thing. Right? So, where was I now? The systemic corruption requires a systemic approach to eradicate, which means that we should be strategic in exercising our values within the political arena. If we have true men of God who have made their stand clear and cannot be compromised, populate the various government departments, then probably and hopefully the change would be faster and noticeable. However, there is no shame in hoping for the best, for what we are doing in regard to a better governance has built on the work done by those who went before us. Those who come after us, we build on what we are doing, and probably change will be evident many years from now. And as young people, we have to take part in this, so that history does not record with astonishment that those who had the most to lose did the least to prevent it from happening. Alright? Let us do all we can, and let it be said that in our times we did all we could. Alright? So, preparedness, the second to last issue. Be aware of the challenges you are likely to encounter and what to expect on the ground. Do not be naive, as many of us are. Preparedness yields competence and consistent application of personal values. Just because you have faith does not make you a good leader. Because you can speak well and you can preach well does not make you a good parliamentarian. You need to know the law when you're going to parliament. You have to be prepared, so that when you go there, you don't become incompetent and we start ridiculing you like we always do to those guys. Some of them sit in parliament for 2 years and do nothing. 5 years. It's actually 5. You must be sure to respond to the right calling, for we are all given different abilities. You are likely to engage with fully informed and competent and godly men. You must therefore be equally informed and competent, but godly and imitable. There is also the aspect of patience. We must be patient to labor in the farm. You don't just wake up today fully inspired to be one great successful Christian politician, and tomorrow you wake up one. You have to be patient, alright? And I'm done with my speech. And now I am moving into my punchline. So I have a punchline in my head I wanted to say. What is at stake? We have to know what is at stake. If we do not act as young people, then you surely know that everything about us is at stake. Because when you walk out here, you can almost see everyone is a young person. Isn't that true? So we have the most to lose. And if you don't act, poverty and unemployment and corruption will continue to take root. I do not understand how for 50 plus years, people in Kibera are still suffering. They don't have food. They don't have water. People in Marsabit don't even have food. They don't even have schools. If you have been privileged to visit some of those very interior places, you will be shocked. Then I am surprised that some people in 20 years, they can amass great wealth. They can buy big hotels like Western. They can buy choppers. They can have land. They can have all they want, in 20 years. And then I understand that it's because of corruption. And if you are naive and you don't appreciate that there is corruption, listen to the words of His Excellency himself. He said that Kenya loses 2 billion every day. I thought that was ridiculous. Until I visited some sites and I actually proved that it is true. The report released by EACC said that Kenya loses a third of its budget on corruption. Therefore, that means that if our budget is 3 trillion, we lose 1 trillion on corruption. And if you divide that by the number of days in a financial year, you actually get that it's actually around 2 billion. And I know now the president is very accurate. And this is not even our money. That is the unfortunate thing. It's borrowed money. I mean, Deloitte released a commentary about on the CBK debt analysis earlier this year, and it said that the public debt of Kenya has risen from 3.619 trillion to 7.6 whatever, 9 what, 4, 6, whatever. But it is actually 7 billion, 7 trillion over the past one financial year. And as at March, that was as at March. And you will be surprised. That is not our money. That means that if we lose a third of our trillion, we are not even losing our own money. We are losing borrowed money to some few people who pocket it. And if we don't act, they will continue doing that. Alright? But the unfortunate thing with us Christian youth, we not everyone nowadays claims to be a Christian. We youth don't want to participate in that. The level of joblessness. I attended a book of fit session one day there. That place, SCC. And the speaker that day said that during that time, during their father's time, 10 jobs were waiting for you when you graduated. In his time, 2 jobs were waiting for you when you graduated. In our times, 2 people are waiting for the same job. And I said, wow, that's really great. But it is very inaccurate because there are not 2 people, actually hundreds are waiting for the same job. There was a job at the Ministry of Interior and Coordination. I know some of you found it, actually saw it. It was advertised. Then I took my papers. It was not even a well-paying job for a clerk. Then I took my papers there to the offices, and I was number 1800 and something. 1800 and something. So, like over 3,000 people. And that was not the last days. That means people still came. So over 3,000 people applied for the same job. And then I said, oh. And most of us don't want to appreciate that fact. Most of us who are in university don't want to appreciate that there is joblessness. But I want to tell us all that we have to be careful. We have to know how to do other things so that we get this scarce resource. Because if we don't do that and we are naive, once we are out there, finding a job will become our job. So we have to be careful. Alright? But all said and done, as I finish, we have to go into politics, young Christian friends of mine. We as the youth have to go in politics. I was just reviewing some things out here, walking around, looking at our generation. It is a generation of thoughtlessness, recklessness, mediocrity. I mean, millennialism is something I don't know. But this generation is tricky. It's a generation that cannot even tell the interface between right and wrong, or fun and madness. You know, there is fun and there is madness. There is fun and there is immorality. It cannot tell the interface. It cannot tell where they meet. And I want to tell us that if we are not careful, we people who actually know value-based leadership, if we are not going to these things, they will go. When our time comes, because the generation in leadership right now, unfortunately, will die sooner or later. And we'll be the ones, that was not a good term, we will be the ones to guide this nation. And unfortunately, even in our careers and everywhere, if we are not careful and bold enough, some of us are not even bold to speak out our faith, just our faith in Hall 6 during evangelism week. We cannot go, we leave it to our evangelistic team. And we are the people entrusted on the nation. It's a shame. If we do not go, they will lead us. They will either do it for fame, fun, and anything. And you can imagine this nation in the hands of people who don't have values. It's already messed. What level of messiness can it go? We have to be very careful. We have to wake up. We have to awaken to this wrong. To wake up and prepare, to have the zeal of this nation, to be patriotic to our nation and be zealous so that we don't just concentrate on our own lives, but we also concentrate on building this nation, building ourselves so that when our time comes, we can actually do it right. Alright? And I'm submitting to us all, if you have a dream of becoming a member of parliament, work on it right now and pray a lot that the Lord may provide the means. You just work on your values, work on your competence. When you get there, God knows how, then do what you're supposed to do. Because if we don't, they will go. And we will forever complain. And considering our upcoming elections as I finish, we are heading to a moment of choice. I want to submit to us that we have to vote right. I mean, I have no shame in saying that just because someone stood and said, I'm a hustler, does not guarantee you to choose that person. So what? Just because someone stood and proposed BBI, or because he's from your tribe, that does not make him an efficient president. They have given us what do you call them? Models. But I have an uncomfortable feeling that the promises of these models aren't something we can base the future for our nation, the hopes for the future of our nation. Vote right, even if it means you are the only one who will vote for that person, vote. And in a moment where we are recycling, the same leaders recycling, they promised us this thing this time. Now we gave them the seats, then they come up with a different strategy, they promise us other things, and we are convinced they will do it. Why did they do it in the other terms? You have to be very careful and stop being naive and pretending like those are actually matters. Know them and vote carefully, and don't just be manipulated like everyone else. I am saddened by the manipulation in our nation. You walk at the border, somewhere here, and you hear the border people talk, and you are just sad. Because they will talk of things and you just don't know what to say. Let's not be part of the cohort that will be manipulated, all right? And let us remember to be peacemakers and not peace takers as we head to our elections. Are we together? Are we together, church? Yeah, water that fruit, that thing in you. We might not have anything to show for it right now, but at least we have a dream. You have a dream for the future of the nation. We have a dream for a better nation. We have a dream of a nation where we don't have to struggle to look for jobs as youth. We have a dream where poverty does not have to kill us all over. And that should be enough to make us pray a lot and work hard towards going into governance. Don't fear. Fear has a way of reviving the enemy from within us and causing us to stop doing the right things. Have you ever asked yourself what would have happened if you just had taken that bold choice, or that time when you were faced by such a choice? It's time to take a bold choice as Christians, work hard towards going into governance and not repelling governance from us, and not being ignorant to even not vote. Some of us say we won't vote, but let's be careful to even vote and be bold to take those risks to go to governance. Hallelujah. And I'm done. As the speaker comes, I'm encouraged by, not the speaker, what are you? The service leader. Can just come. Mukeni. I was just reflecting upon the words of one of Kenya's great sons called Barack Obama. He said, yes, we can. And everything is in that statement. You should have seen that YouTube video I watched. Those people, the synergy, the energy when he told them, yes, we can. And I can add that, yes, we can, only through Christ who enables us. Hallelujah.